Aged homeless people are particularly vulnerable if you try to compare them, say, to your own parents who are living, I presume, in a house with loved ones around them, some income and some healthcare system. If you take all of those things away, and so the person is totally isolated and alone, and then if you add a few common factors such as poor education, poor health, you can see that they become extremely vulnerable. I guess I didn't really twig just how bad it was until my parents got sick, and then I had to get them aged care. And I discovered the aged care system in Australia and realised how wonderful it was. So my natural then question was, why can't I get my guys into aged care? I'm a pretty forceful fellow and I didn't get one placement in 2 years into mainstream aged care. So I thought, well, the best thing to do is to create a new company. So probably a bit silly and adventurous, but whatever the reason, I left the organisation I worked for, Gordon House, and created a new welfare organisation. And I know this is a story about philanthropy, so let me tell you that I started Wintringham with two $10,000 grants, and that we've turned that into a company that employs 700 people, has a turnover of over $40 million, and is the largest provider now for services to homeless elderly people in the country. So. The Wicking grant came at a really good time for Wintringham. I felt frustrated and distressed that some of our guys were being lost. Now, a percentage of those people have a brain injury, alcohol-related brain injury or trauma-related brain injury. We've always struggled to care for those people.
Before Wintringham, I was in a number of boarding houses, drifting. At that time, I was drinking so heavily because I made some friends with some of the other people in the building, drug addicts, alcoholics. Looking for a drink, of course. I told them I was going out for the day. Then I kept walking and walking, trying to find someone to give me some money so I could get a drink. And eventually I got $5. So I was able to get a bottle of wine. Apparently, I don't remember much of it, but I know I ended up in hospital. They told me I was hit by a tram. Yeah, so badly bruised, but I survived.
If you look into the suburbs, there are a lot of people who have got an alcohol-related brain injury who are being misdiagnosed as Alzheimer's. And to some extent, I can understand it. Nobody wants a nurse or a doctor to say, your dad's a drunk. But a brain injury, it's an injury which primarily affects the frontal lobes. And in here is the whole decision-making part of the brain. So you'll get violent eruptions of anger with no concept of the consequences of that action. And it makes care for people with a brain injury extremely difficult.
I never knew what a blackout was. I thought you'd have to be unconscious, but you don't have to be unconscious. So I ended up going into shops and stealing clothes, whatever I could get my hands hold of. But I was caught, of course, and ended up going in front of a magistrate. But those times, the blackouts, I don't remember anything of it.
The simple answer to a question that might be phrased, what happens without wicking, is death. And it's an ignoble and horrible and frightening death. I think one of the things that is really worth mentioning is that it's the terror of the streets that is so debilitating to all people, but particularly when you're frail and elderly. To live and die on the streets alone must be the worst death of all. I'm regularly asked by organisations about the role of philanthropy. I have a very strong view on it. I think that philanthropy should go to innovation. It should go to organisations that are not only innovative, but are living on the edge a bit. When wicking was first suggested to us, and I was invited to the inaugural round table to discuss how this wonderful grant should be used, I put forward this idea, well, let's put some of the money to alcohol-related brain injury. And that was accepted. And that was became known as Wicking 1. And we did it in a standalone building that was adjacent to one of our hostels. So the staff came from the hostel and worked in this special building. Some of the wicking staff were specialised, but they're all from WINTRINGHAM. And that worked amazingly well. But it was very small. There were 7 people in the wicking trial over the 2-year period, and there were 7 in a control group, so that we part of the rigour of the research to see whether we're actually making this work. And it was a wonderful success, so much so that Wicking agreed, the trustees, to fund a Wicking 2. So Wicking 2 was actually based in an aged care facility, in a brand new one we just built in Dandenong. And that was the same principles as Wicking 1, but Wicking 2, they were actually based in the hostel. And I had staff who would literally be in tears in my office saying, we can't look after this guy anymore. We've tried everything, but we can't anymore. The consequences is that if WINTRINGHAM can't look after them, nobody can. Basically, we needed to have more staff to spend one-on-one time with the clients, to establish routines and boundaries. Through extraordinary patience, stability, taking all the terror out of these people's lives and giving them some supports, we were able to find that after a person had gone through the wicking trial, they were able to transition into WINTRINGHAM. It was quite stunning. We had never that intention at all, but every one of them we began to realise that actually could make the transition. So our third building was in Port Melbourne. This is where we are at the moment, and this building is again a little bit like wicking in a way. We've learned from our previous buildings what's worked and what hasn't. We built an environment where, if you like, there's almost fences, and they can operate within that fence. You take that fence down, it's too wide for them, and that's where they came from. Now we build it in, but these are fences that are done with the client. It's not imposed on the client.
WINTRINGHAM always make time for each one of us. We can, for me, especially my unit, I have a lady who comes every fortnight, a support worker. We just have a coffee or have a good chat. We love having chats together, Helen and I. I'm just so blessed. I'm so blessed to have a lovely little WINTRINGHAM unit, which I love.
So it has 35 people living here. And it has a series of little cottages with everybody has their own ensuite. I wanted to create an environment where people lived in. So staff were working in someone's house, not residents living in a workplace. And we wanted visitors, but we wanted visitors to know that they were living in someone else's place. We've noticed the gardens throughout WINTRINGHAM has a calming effect on wicking clients for a start, but also people who just have general disabilities and psych issues. And the staff stay because they're content and they're happy, they like working with these guys, and it's a lovely environment.
I'm recovering at the moment. I'm 2 years, 9 months nearly. I'll be 3 years old on Christmas Eve, which is wonderful. WINTRINGHAM it has saved my life.
To do something really innovative like this, where there's almost no kickback for wicking, there's no great publicity because we're not a well-known agency that everybody can say, well, that was sensible money going there. If this program is working as well as we believe it is, and if we can demonstrate it and document it so a third party sees it, that it works as well, we're going to need more numbers. So we need to keep on this program and keep it running. When you try to do things on a really edgy area, which is with high risk, could easily fall down, to take that on and to be backed, it's wonderful, wonderful.